Hello, and today we're going to be reviewing the Ryobi P592 18-volt bolt cutters, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, starting off at the rear of the tool, we have the battery slot. The battery slot will accept any of Ryobi's lithium 18-volt batteries, and they fit into the slot super securely with absolutely no wiggling or looseness to speak of. At least that is measurable by the human eye. And when it comes to battery life, this particular tool is a sipper and not a guzzler, and will easily outperform a reciprocating saw performing a similar job as this particular tool. So this is a great option for people who don't have large batteries and have to do a lot of cutting on, I don't know, bolts, screws, or hog wire fencing. And quite frankly, it's a great tool for those purposes. So as far as I'm concerned, everything here gets an A+. Okay, next up we have the forward and rear grip and the ergonomics of this particular tool. Now, both the front and rear grip will feature a rubberized texture with some patterning or patterns molded into the rubber. The forward grip only has a real amount of rubberized texture on the top and bottom of the tool, and the rear grip has it in all the usual places. Overall, it's a fairly easy tool to hold onto, and there's enough room on both the forward and rear grips so you can wear gloves and still easily operate the tool. And when it comes to the overall usability and weight of the tool and handling of the tool, it's a fairly good showing. This is a front heavy tool because of the jaws, but if you pair it with a large battery, it's fairly evenly weighted. And if you use it with a smaller battery, well, that just means the tool is lighter and easier to carry. So honestly, I don't really have much in the way of complaints when it comes to this particular tool's ergonomics. So yeah, everything here seems to work fairly effectively and everything gets a pass. So let's go ahead and move on. Okay, next up we have the power controls for the tool. The controls are located where the trigger would typically be located on a reciprocating saw or drill, and there are two different buttons underneath the rubberized covers that allow you to have full control over the jaws of the tool. Top button will open the jaws, and the bottom button will close the jaws. You can release the buttons whenever you want, and, well, that's about the sum of it. There is no speed control. You are locked into whatever speed the motor is operating at, and typically it takes about 2 seconds for the jaws to open and about 2 seconds for the jaws to close. But depending on what you're cutting through, this can take longer. So yeah, everything here is pretty standard. Well, standard for a unique tool, I guess. And I don't really have any complaints or anything that I would change on this particular tool. So as far as I'm concerned, everything here gets a pass. Moving on. Okay, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the jaws on this particular tool. It works pretty much just like a standard pair of bolt cutters. The jaws open, they close, and they destroy whatever's in between. It can cut up to an object up to 3/8 in diameter, and it seems to work fairly well on bolts, locks, and wood screws as far as I'm concerned. I primarily have used this tool to cut hog wire fencing and the occasional padlock that has either had the key lost or has become rusted shut. So it's a fairly typical performance when it comes to just its overall intended purpose. Now, I will say that when it comes to the overall quality of the jaws on this particular tool, it's not the worst that I've seen, but it's not the best that I've seen either. After 100 or so cuts, the jaws have started to deform, and by 300 or so cuts, they are probably getting fairly close to being needed to be replaced at this point. So your experience may vary depending on what you are cutting, but for me, it's been a fairly good performance, and I'm not too irritated by the fact that they're deforming. But like I said earlier, I have seen better quality jaws on other tools. So yeah, the one last thing that you need to be aware of is the fact that the Phillips head screws do come loose, and you should probably get some Loctite and, well, Loctite the heck out of them to make sure that they don't fall out randomly. This tool doesn't vibrate a whole lot, so I'm a little bit confused why they come loose, but they seem to come loose, so it's just something that you need to keep an eye on. And it's only the screws that are located pretty much near the front of the tool on the jaws itself. So yeah, just make sure that they're tight every once in a while, and if you can, buy some Loctite and tighten them and make sure that they're properly seated and Loctited into position. So yeah, other than that, everything here is a fairly good performance without any major problems. Moving on. Okay, without a battery, it weighs 2,362 grams, which is about 5.2 pounds. And with a 4.5 hour battery, it weighs 3,083 grams, which is about 6.8 pounds. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about this particular tool in use. I have to say, it really is a fun tool to use. It really becomes addicting trying to find random objects to cut because of just how fun it is to, well, easily cut through locks, bolts, wire cutter, or wire fencing panels, and just the occasional random object or rusted screwdriver just to see how well it works. And I have to say, as long as it fits between the blades or the bar or jaws on this particular tool, it usually can cut through it. And I haven't really met anything that it has a hard time cutting through unless it's way too thin. But with that being said, I don't think this tool is for everyone. If you live in a residential area, I think there's probably better tools for you to take a look at. This really is meant more for a ranch or farm scenario. And unless you're older and have a hard time using a manual pair of bolt cutters, I don't think there's much of a reason for you to buy this particular tool, since there are going to be better options for you to take a look at. And, well, if you are going to be using this for a commercial purpose, you might be disappointed. I don't think this tool is going to be able to hold up for long periods of time in a commercial setting where you're using it 50 times a day. It's probably going to wear out fairly quickly. But if you are somebody that just needs to use it 3 or 4 times a year for long extended periods of time, it's probably going to work just fine. But everyone's use scenario is different, so it really is going to be up to you. Like I said earlier, I think this is going to be better for light duty commercial use rather than heavy duty commercial use. But for me personally, this has been a fantastic tool to use on the farm slash ranch slash whatever we are. And it definitely has come in handy, and it's a tool I enjoy using. I can also see this being a valuable tool for if you're somebody who likes to go four-wheeling and you run into the occasional gate that has a lock on it that you need to cut. Wink wink. Just try not to do anything too illegal with this particular tool. So yeah, with that being said, let's go ahead and recap the pros and cons. Okay, the first pro is the 18 volt. 18 volt means that this will work with your Ryobi 18 volt batteries, and if you so choose to, you can adapt batteries over from other brands via third-party adapter. Just remember, you do that at your own risk. Compact. This is a fairly compact pair of bolt cutters, and this is going to be handy for storing underneath car seats or inside of tool bags, so this is a pro in my opinion. Unique. This is a fairly unique tool, and it is a useful tool, which is kind of a pro in my opinion. It's also a pro that it's in the Ryobi system and not another system, so yeah, moving on. Works great. When I first purchased this particular tool, I had my doubts, but it seems to be working just fine, and I'm glad, so that's a pro. Battery life. Overall, this tool does not take much in the way of battery life, and so you can comfortably use it with a 2 amp hour battery for long periods of time. So this is definitely a pro in my opinion. And the first meh would be brushed. It would have been nice to have a brushless motor, but the brush motor does get the job done, so it's not really a positive, it's not really a negative, it's just kind of meh. And the first con would be no light. It really would have been nice to have a light on this particular tool, especially if you're working in dark conditions. But I can understand why some of Ryobi's client base might not like having a light on this particular tool. Moving on. Softer metal jaws. I've seen worse bolt cutter jaws, but I've also seen better. This is definitely middle of the pack, and considering the price that you're paying for this particular tool, going with a little bit higher quality of jaws would have been the route to go. So unfortunately, there is a little bit of a con here. Not a big one, but there is one here. And finally, loose screws. Over time, the screws can become loose on the head of this particular tool, so I would highly recommend checking them regularly and maybe using some Loctite to make sure that they stay in position. Okay, and that is it for the pros and cons. Final thoughts on this particular tool. I really do like using this particular tool, and I think it definitely comes in handy and will save you money on saw blades and grinding discs. But I don't think this particular tool is for everyone, and I really think that you need to evaluate whether or not it's going to work for you. I think for light duty commercial use it'll be okay, but if you're planning on using it daily to make 30 or 40 cuts every day, it's probably going to wear out fairly quickly. I think that this tool is definitely more geared towards a more residential or light duty commercial use, say on a farm or ranch or something, and not in an industry where you're cutting off seals off of shipping containers or cutting bolts off on a daily basis. For me personally, I use this 3 or 4 times a year, and probably more than that, and it definitely comes in handy, and I don't really have any complaints. So as far as I'm concerned, this tool comes recommended as long as you know what you're getting into. And that is it for this video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe, and we will see you next time. God bless.